My name is Lily, and if there's one thing I love, it's summer. And if there's one thing I really love about summer, it's my pool. Not just any pool, mind you. This is a pool I saved up for, dreamed about, and finally got installed last year. It's kidney-shaped, a beautiful sparkling blue, and has a little waterfall feature that sounds like a gentle rain. It's basically my own personal paradise in my backyard. My backyard itself is pretty great, too. I've got a big patio with comfy lounge chairs, a bright yellow umbrella for shade, and a little outdoor kitchen area where I can grill burgers and hot dogs. I planted colorful flowers all around the pool to attract butterflies and hummingbirds. It's my happy place. The pool is the perfect depth, not too shallow for swimming laps, but not too deep that my little cousins can't splash around safely. The water is always the perfect temperature, thanks to the solar heater I installed. Evenings are the best. I string up fairy lights around the patio, turn on some music, and float on my back, looking up at the stars. I take really good care of my pool. I skim it every day, check the chemicals, and make sure everything is clean and sparkling. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. Especially since I live in a neighborhood with an HOA, a homeowners association. They have rules about everything, from the color of your house to the length of your grass. So, keeping my pool pristine is important to avoid any trouble. Little did I know, the trouble was brewing in a completely different direction than I expected. It wasn't about the cleanliness of the pool, it was about who was using it. And that, who was about to become a major pain in my perfect summer paradise. It all started with swim lessons I definitely did not agree to hosting. Living in an HOA neighborhood has its perks, I guess. The streets are clean, the landscaping is well maintained, and everyone's house looks relatively similar. But the rules, oh, the rules. There's a rule for everything. And I mean everything. One of the biggest rules, and the one that's most relevant to this story, is about the pools. See, our community does have a shared pool, a big one, near the clubhouse. According to the HOA, that pool is a common area, meaning it's for everyone who lives in the neighborhood and pays their dues. There are specific rules about the common pool, hours of operation, guest policies, what kind of swimsuits are allowed, seriously, and even rules about splashing. But my pool? That's a different story. My pool is on my property. It's not a common area. It's a private amenity. And according to the HOA rules, homeowners are allowed to do pretty much whatever they want with their private amenities, as long as it doesn't violate any other rules, like noise ordinances or building codes. So, I can have a pool party until midnight if I want, as long as the music isn't too loud, and I can decorate my pool area with pink flamingos if I feel like it. The HOA guidelines were very clear. Anything inside the fence surrounding my property was my domain. My pool, my rules. I paid for it, I maintained it, I was responsible for it. No one else had any right to use it without my express permission. That's what I thought, anyway. Apparently, someone in the neighborhood had a very different interpretation of the rules. An interpretation that involved commandeering my private oasis for her own personal gain. And that someone, unfortunately, was about to make my life a whole lot more complicated, and a whole lot icier. This brings us to our main character, who we will call Karen for obvious reasons. But before we get to her antics, it is important to lay the ground rules as to who can use the pool. Because believe me, she will argue about it. Let me introduce you to Karen. Now, I'm not usually one to label people, but in this case, the name just fits. She lives 3 houses down from me, has perfectly manicured lawns, of course, and drives a ridiculously large SUV that she somehow manages to park diagonally across 2 spaces at the grocery store. Karen is the type of person who always has an opinion, even when nobody asked for it. She's on the HOA board, which probably explains a lot, and she seems to think it's her personal mission to enforce every single rule, no matter how small or insignificant. I've seen her measure people's grass with a ruler, I'm not even kidding, and she once left a nasty note on my neighbor's door because his Christmas lights were the wrong shade of white. We'd had a few run-ins before the pool incident. Once, she complained that my flower pots were too colorful and didn't match the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Another time, she gave me a lecture about properly sorting my recycling. Each interaction was more irritating than the last, but I usually just smiled politely and tried to avoid her. I figured she was just a busybody with too much time on her hands. But then came the pool. And that's when things escalated from mildly annoying to completely outrageous. I should have known, based on our past interactions, that she wouldn't respect my personal space or my property rights. But I honestly didn't expect her to be so bold. It wasn't just a simple misunderstanding or a minor infraction. It was a blatant disregard for the rules, for my privacy, and for common courtesy. And it all started with a group of kids, some kickboards, and a whole lot of splashing. She thought she could get away with anything, that the rules didn't apply to her. But she was wrong. So very, very wrong. And that's when I decided I had to do something about it. Something drastic. Something involving a whole lot of ice. But first, I had to witness the crime. It was a Saturday morning, around 10 a.m. I was enjoying a cup of coffee on my patio, reading a book, and generally just soaking up the peacefulness of the morning. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the pool was sparkling invitingly. Suddenly, I heard the unmistakable sound of children splashing. At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids splash. It's what they do. But then I realized the splashing was coming from my backyard. From my pool. I peeked over the fence, and what I saw made my jaw drop. There was Karen, standing on the edge of my pool, fully dressed in a bright pink swimsuit cover-up and sunglasses, clipboard in hand. And in my pool were about 5 or 6 kids, all wearing swimsuits and goggles, kicking and splashing and generally having a grand old time. "Kick harder, Timmy!" Karen yelled, pointing at one of the kids. "And remember to keep your head down." I couldn't believe my eyes. She was giving swim lessons. In my pool. Without my permission. Without even asking. I quickly put down my coffee and marched over to the gate that separated my patio from the pool area. I unlocked it and stepped inside, trying to keep my voice calm. "Karen," I said, "what are you doing?" She turned around, a surprised look on her face, as if she hadn't expected me to be home. "Oh, Lily," she said, with a fake smile. "I was just giving these children some swim lessons. They need to learn how to swim, you know. It's a life skill." "I understand that," I said, trying to control my rising anger. "But you're doing it in my pool. Without asking me. This is my private property." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be silly," she said. "It's just a pool. And these children are learning something important. Besides," she added with a smirk, "it's not like you're using it right now." That was it. That was the moment I knew I was going to have to take drastic action. Her audacity was unbelievable. She had not only trespassed on my property but was also acting like she was doing me a favor. This wasn't just a simple mistake. This was a deliberate act of disrespect. And I wasn't going to let her get away with it. The ice plan started to form in my mind. It was crazy, it was over the top, but it was the only way to make her understand that she couldn't just walk all over me. But before I could unleash the ice, I had to try being reasonable. I had to give her one last chance to do the right thing. I took a deep breath, trying to remain as calm as possible, even though every fiber of my being was screaming. "Karen," I said, forcing a polite smile, "I really need you to stop using my pool for your swim lessons. It's not a community pool, it's my private property. I'm not comfortable with you using it without my permission." Karen rolled her eyes, a gesture that made my blood boil even further. "Oh, Lily, don't be so dramatic," she said, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "It's just a little swim lesson. The kids are having fun, and it's good exercise for them. Besides, where else are they going to learn to swim? There's a perfectly good community pool just down the street, I pointed out, trying to keep my voice steady. That's what it's there for. Karen scoffed. That pool is always so crowded and noisy, she said. And the lifeguards are never paying attention. My swim lessons are much more effective, and the children get personalized attention. That may be true, I said, but that doesn't give you the right to use my pool without my permission. I'm asking you nicely, Karen, please take your swim lessons somewhere else. Karen crossed her arms and gave me a defiant look. I don't see what the big deal is, she said. It's not like you're using the pool right now. And I'm sure these children's parents would be very grateful if they knew you were trying to stop their kids from learning to swim. She was trying to guilt-trip me. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe how entitled she was acting. It was as if she genuinely believed she had the right to use my pool whenever she wanted, regardless of what I thought. Karen, I said, my voice now losing its polite edge, I'm not going to argue with you about this. I want you and these children to leave my property right now. If you don't, I'm going to call the police. Karen just laughed. Go ahead and call them, she said. They'll just tell you that you're being unreasonable. Besides, she added with a sly smile, I'm sure the HOA wouldn't approve of you causing a scene in the neighborhood. That was it. I'd had enough. I knew that trying to reason with her was pointless. She was determined to do whatever she wanted, regardless of the consequences. It was time to escalate things. The ice plan was officially a go. But first, I decided to call the HOA. Maybe, just maybe, they could do something to stop her before I had to resort to extreme measures. I knew it was a long shot, but it was worth a try. After all, I paid my dues. Surely, they would enforce their own rules, right? I was about to find out how effective they really were. I grabbed my phone and dialed the HOA's number, my hands shaking with frustration. After a seemingly endless wait, listening to elevator music, I finally got through to someone. Hi, this is Lily Thompson, and I live at 123 Main Street, I said, trying to sound as composed as possible. I have a complaint about a neighbor using my private pool without my permission. The person on the other end of the line, who identified herself as Brenda, sounded completely uninterested. Okay, and who is this neighbor? She asked, with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. It's Karen Miller, who lives at 126 Main Street, I said. She's giving swim lessons in my pool, and I've asked her to stop, but she refuses. Brenda sighed. Okay, I'll make a note of it, she said. But I can't promise anything will be done right away. These things take time, you know. We have to investigate and send out a notice of violation, and then there's a hearing. But this is a clear violation of the HOA rules. I protested. My pool is private property. She can't just use it without my permission. Brenda's voice was flat. I understand, ma'am, but we have to follow the proper procedures. It could take several weeks, maybe even months, for this to be resolved. Months? I exclaimed, incredulous. Are you serious? She's going to be using my pool for swim lessons all summer long while you're following the proper procedures. Brenda didn't respond. Look, I said, trying to appeal to her sense of reason, I'm a paying member of this HOA. I expect you to enforce the rules, especially when it's a clear-cut case like this. Can't you at least send someone out to talk to her and tell her to stop? I can put in a request for that, Brenda said, but I can't guarantee anyone will be available. We're very busy, you know. I hung up the phone, feeling completely defeated. The HOA was useless. They were more concerned with bureaucracy and paperwork than with actually enforcing their own rules. I knew that if I wanted anything to be done, I was going to have to take matters into my own hands. The ice plan was no longer just a possibility, it was a necessity. Karen had left me no choice. As I stared out at my pool, still filled with splashing children, I started to map out the logistics. How much ice would I need? Where would I get it? And how would I pull it off without getting caught? It was going to be a challenge, but I was determined to make it happen. Karen was about to learn that messing with me and my pool was a very, very bad idea. She picked the wrong person to mess with. Days turned into a week, and still, Karen continued to use my pool as if it were her own personal swimming academy. It was infuriating. I would wake up on Saturday mornings to the sound of splashing and yelling, and I would see Karen, clipboard in hand, directing her little swim students in my backyard. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible. Every time I looked out my window, I felt a surge of anger and resentment. It wasn't just about the pool anymore, it was about the principle of the thing. It was about Karen's blatant disregard for my rights and my property. What made it even worse was that she was becoming bolder. At first, she would only use the pool for an hour or two on Saturday mornings. But now, she was using it on weekdays as well, sometimes even in the evenings. She would bring snacks and drinks for the kids, set up towels and chairs on my patio, and generally treat my backyard like it was her own personal hangout spot. One afternoon, I even caught her using my grill to cook hot dogs for the kids. That was the last straw. I stormed out to the pool area, ready to unleash my full fury. "Karen!" I yelled, my voice shaking with anger. "What do you think you're doing? You can't just use my grill without asking." Karen looked up, unfazed. "Oh, hi, Lily," she said casually. "I was just making a little snack for the kids. They were getting hungry after their swim lesson." "This is unbelievable!" I exclaimed. "You're using my pool, my patio, and now my grill without even asking. Don't you have any respect for my property?" Karen shrugged. "I don't see what the big deal is," she said. "It's not like you're using any of this stuff right now. Besides, the kids are having so much fun. You should be happy that I'm providing them with a valuable service." I was speechless. Her audacity was beyond belief. I couldn't even find the words to express how angry I was. I just stood there, glaring at her, my fists clenched at my sides. "Get out," I finally managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Get out of my yard, and don't ever come back." Karen just smirked. "Fine," she said. "But you're going to regret this, Lily. You're going to regret making an enemy of me." She gathered up her things and her little swim students and marched out of my yard, leaving me standing there, seething with rage. I knew that I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to do something to stop her, once and for all. The ice plan was no longer just a possibility, it was my only option. But I needed to make sure it was perfect. The perfect amount of ice. The perfect timing. Everything had to be just right. This was war. And I was going to win. The days that followed were filled with a simmering rage. I felt like I was living in a pressure cooker, constantly on edge, waiting for Karen to make her next move. I spent hours staring out my window, watching my pool, making sure she didn't dare try to sneak back in. I was also consumed with planning the ice attack. I researched different ice delivery companies, comparing prices and delivery schedules. I calculated the exact amount of ice I would need to fill my pool, taking into account the depth and the surface area. I even considered adding some blue food coloring to the ice to make it look extra dramatic. But more than the logistics, I worried about the consequences. What if Karen called the police? What if the HOA fined me? What if the neighbors thought I was crazy? I knew that what I was planning was extreme, but I felt like I had no other choice. I had tried being reasonable, I had tried reporting her to the HOA, but nothing had worked. Karen had pushed me too far, and I was determined to make her pay. I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night, replaying the confrontations with Karen in my head, imagining the look on her face when she saw my pool filled with ice. I also started to feel guilty. Was I really going to stoop to her level? Was revenge really the answer? But then I would remember the feeling of helplessness and frustration, the feeling of being violated and disrespected, and my resolve would return. Karen had taken away my peace and tranquility, and I was going to take it back, one ice cube at a time. I also started confiding in my friend, Sarah. She listened patiently as I ranted and raved about Karen and her swim lessons. She didn't judge me or try to talk me out of my plan. Instead, she offered her support and encouragement. "You go, girl," she said. "That Karen sounds like a real piece of work. She deserves whatever's coming to her." Sarah's support gave me the confidence I needed to move forward. I knew that I wasn't alone in this. I had a friend who believed in me and who understood my frustration. And that made all the difference. The plan was set. The ice was ordered. And Karen was about to get a very chilly surprise. I felt a surge of anticipation and excitement. This was it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. It was time to unleash the ice. But first, I needed a good night's sleep. Because tomorrow was going to be a long day. A very long, and very icy, day. The ice plan, as Sarah and I affectionately called it, was elaborate, maybe even a little crazy. First, there was the ice. I needed a lot of ice. After some calculations, I determined that I would need about 5 tons of ice to fill my pool to a satisfying level of iciness. That's 10,000 pounds. Finding an ice company that could deliver that much ice on short notice proved to be a challenge. Most of the local companies specialized in smaller deliveries for parties and events. But after a few phone calls, I finally found a company that catered to restaurants and other businesses that needed large quantities of ice. They were a bit more expensive, but they could deliver the ice the next morning, which was crucial. Next, I had to figure out how to get the ice into the pool. I couldn't just dump it all in one spot, or it would damage the liner. I needed to distribute it evenly across the surface of the water. I considered using a wheelbarrow, but that would take forever. Then I had an idea, a large, heavy-duty tarp. I could have the ice company dump the ice onto the tarp, and then Sarah and I could drag the tarp to the edge of the pool and carefully slide the ice into the water. Of course, there was also the issue of visibility. I didn't want Karen or any of the neighbors to see what I was up to. So, I planned to start the ice delivery early in the morning, before anyone was awake. I also parked my car in front of my house to block the view from the street. Finally, there was the potential for things to go wrong. What if it rained? What if the ice melted before Karen arrived? What if she somehow found out about my plan and sabotaged it? I tried to anticipate every possible problem and come up with a solution. I knew that what I was doing was risky, but I was willing to take the chance. Karen had pushed me too far, and I was determined to make her pay. The ice plan was my way of taking back control, of standing up for myself, and of sending a clear message to Karen that she couldn't just walk all over me. And I had a feeling that it was going to be glorious. But getting 5 tons of ice delivered to your home is no easy feat, especially when you are trying to be discreet. I had to plan every step with precision. Because if I failed, not only would Karen continue to use my pool, but I would also be the laughingstock of the neighborhood. And that was something I absolutely could not allow to happen. The night before the ice delivery was a flurry of activity. Sarah arrived around 7 p.m., armed with snacks, drinks, and an infectious enthusiasm. We spent the evening double-checking our supplies, making sure we had everything we needed for the next morning. We laid out the tarp in my backyard, making sure it was clean and free of any sharp objects that could puncture it. We also set up a system of ropes and pulleys to help us drag the tarp to the edge of the pool. I reviewed the delivery instructions with the ice company, emphasizing the importance of arriving on time and being as quiet as possible. I also gave them specific instructions on where to dump the ice, making sure it was away from any trees or bushes that could be damaged. As the evening wore on, I started to get nervous. What if something went wrong? What if Karen saw us and called the police? What if the ice melted before she arrived? I tried to push these thoughts out of my head and focus on the task at hand. Sarah could see that I was getting anxious, so she put on some music and we started dancing around the backyard. It was silly, but it helped to lighten the mood and take my mind off things. Around 10 p.m., we decided to call it a night. We knew we needed to get some sleep if we were going to be up early for the ice delivery. Sarah slept on the couch in my living room, and I went to bed in my own room. But I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned for hours, my mind racing with thoughts of the ice plan. I imagined Karen's reaction when she saw my pool filled with ice. I pictured the look of shock and disbelief on her face. And I couldn't help but smile. Finally, around 2 a.m., I drifted off to sleep. But my sleep was fitful and restless. I kept waking up, checking the time, and wondering if it was time for the ice delivery yet. When my alarm finally went off at 5 a.m., I jumped out of bed, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was it. This was the day I had been waiting for. It was time to put the ice plan into action. I quietly got dressed, grabbed a cup of coffee, and headed outside to meet Sarah. The air was cool and crisp, and the sky was just beginning to lighten. It was the perfect morning for revenge. And I couldn't wait to see Karen's face. This was going to be the best summer ever. Or at least, the coolest. But before the chaos could begin, we had to ensure that the coast was clear. Karen was an early riser, and I didn't want her catching us in the act. The element of surprise was crucial to the success of the ice plan. We crept out to the front of the house, peering down the street, half expecting to see Karen already up and about, power walking her way to an early morning confrontation. Thankfully, the street was deserted. A few birds were chirping, and the sky was slowly turning from a dark blue to a soft pink, but there was no sign of Karen. "Coast is clear," Sarah whispered, giving me a thumbs up. "Let's get this show on the road." Just then, we heard the rumble of a large truck in the distance. "That must be them," I said, my heart pounding with excitement. We hurried back to the backyard, making sure everything was in place. We double-checked the tarp, the ropes, and the pulleys. We also made sure we had our gloves and sunglasses on, ready to face the mountain of ice that was about to arrive. The truck pulled up in front of my house, its engine rumbling loudly. A large man in a blue uniform got out of the truck and approached us. "Lily Thompson?" he asked, his voice gruff. "That's me," I said, trying to sound confident. "I've got your ice," he said, gesturing to the back of the truck. "Where do you want it?" I pointed to the tarp in my backyard. "Dump it right there," I said. "But be careful not to damage anything." The man nodded and climbed back into the truck. He maneuvered the truck into position and then started to unload the ice. It was an incredible sight. Huge blocks of ice came sliding down a chute, crashing onto the tarp with a deafening roar. The noise was attracting attention. I noticed a few of my neighbors peeking out of their windows, wondering what all the commotion was about. I quickly waved at them and smiled, trying to look as casual as possible. "Just getting some ice for a party," I yelled, hoping they would buy it. Some of them waved back, but others just stared at me with puzzled expressions. I could tell they were suspicious. But there was nothing I could do about it now. The ice was already pouring out of the truck, and I had to focus on getting it into the pool before anyone figured out what I was really up to. This party was going to be one they would not forget. A shiver went down my spine. Was it the early morning chill, or was it the realization that I was about to cross a line? Either way, there was no turning back now. The ice was here, and Karen was about to get a rude awakening. The stage was set. The actors were in place. It was showtime. And I was ready to give the performance of a lifetime. With the ice unloaded, the real work began. Sarah and I grabbed the ropes attached to the tarp and started pulling. The tarp was incredibly heavy, and the ice kept shifting and sliding, making it difficult to maintain our grip. "Heave-ho!" Sarah yelled, trying to inject some humor into the situation. We strained and grunted, our muscles burning with effort. Slowly but surely, we managed to drag the tarp to the edge of the pool. The neighbors were still watching us, their curiosity piqued. I could see Karen's curtains twitching in her window. I knew she was watching us too. "Okay, ready?" I said to Sarah, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice breathless. Together, we tilted the tarp, carefully sliding the ice into the pool. The water level rose quickly as the ice filled the pool. The sound of the ice hitting the water was deafening, echoing through the neighborhood. It took us nearly an hour to empty the tarp completely. By the time we were finished, my pool was filled with a glistening mountain of ice. It was a truly spectacular sight. "Wow," Sarah said, gazing at the pool in amazement. "You actually did it." I grinned, feeling a surge of triumph. "I told you I would," I said. "Now all we have to do is wait for Karen." We cleaned up the tarp and ropes, trying to erase any evidence of our early morning activities. We then went inside and made ourselves a cup of coffee. We sat by the window, watching the street, waiting for Karen to arrive. The sun was rising higher in the sky, and the neighborhood was starting to come to life. People were getting ready for work, walking their dogs, and watering their lawns. But all I could focus on was Karen. I knew she would be furious when she saw what I had done. But I didn't care. I had finally stood up to her, and I wasn't going to back down now. The coffee tasted especially good that morning. It was the taste of victory. But the victory was not complete until I saw the look on her face. The anticipation was killing me. What would she say? What would she do? Would she call the police? Would she try to refill the pool with water? I had no idea. But I was ready for anything. Because I knew that I was in the right. And that gave me all the strength I needed. It was time for Karen to face the music. Or rather, the ice. About an hour later, I saw Karen emerge from her house. She was dressed in her usual bright pink swimsuit cover-up and sunglasses, carrying her clipboard and a stack of towels. She walked down the street with a confident stride, completely oblivious to the icy surprise that awaited her. "Here she comes," I whispered to Sarah, my heart pounding with excitement. We watched as Karen approached my house. She walked right past my car, which was still parked in front to block the view from the street. She didn't seem to notice anything unusual. But then she turned the corner and saw my backyard. And that's when her jaw dropped. She stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes wide with disbelief. She stared at my pool, filled with a glistening mountain of ice, for what seemed like an eternity. I could see her mouth moving, but I couldn't hear what she was saying. I imagined she was uttering a string of expletives. Finally, she snapped out of her trance and marched towards my front door. She rang the doorbell repeatedly, her finger pressing down on the button with a vengeance. "She's here," I said to Sarah, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." I opened the door, trying to look as innocent as possible. "Lily Thompson." Karen shrieked, her face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" I feigned ignorance. "What's the meaning of what?" I asked, batting my eyelashes. Karen pointed towards my backyard, her hand trembling with rage. That ice monstrosity." I shrugged. "Oh, that?" I said. "I'm just getting ready for a party." Karen's eyes narrowed. "A party?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You expect me to believe that you're having a party with a pool full of ice?" I smiled sweetly. "Well, it's going to be a very cool party," I said. Karen was beyond furious. I had never seen her this angry before. She was practically shaking with rage. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You filled my pool with ice just to get back at me." I raised my eyebrows innocently. "Get back at you?" I said. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Karen took a step closer to me, her eyes blazing with fury. "Don't play dumb with me, Lily Thompson," she said. "I know you did this. And you're going to regret it." The moment of truth had arrived. The confrontation was about to begin. And I was ready for it. I had planned this moment for weeks, and I wasn't going to let Karen intimidate me. I had a feeling this was going to be a very interesting conversation. And I couldn't wait to see how it all played out. After all, I had the moral high ground. She was the one who had been trespassing on my property and disrespecting my rights. I was just defending myself. And I was doing it with style. And a whole lot of ice. It was time for Karen to face the consequences of her actions. And I was ready to make sure she did. "Karen," I said, my voice firm but calm, "I've asked you nicely to stop using my pool. I've reported you to the HOA. But you haven't listened. You've continued to trespass on my property and disrespect my rights. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands." Karen sputtered, her face turning an even deeper shade of red. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This is harassment. I'm going to call the police." "Go ahead," I said, shrugging. "They'll just tell you that you're the one who's been breaking the law by trespassing on my property." Karen glared at me, her eyes filled with hatred. "You're going to regret this, Lily Thompson," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You've made a powerful enemy today." "I'm not afraid of you, Karen," I said, standing my ground. "I'm just protecting my property and my rights. And I'm not going to let you bully me anymore." Karen stood there for a moment, speechless with rage. Then, she turned on her heel and stormed back to her house, slamming the door behind her. I watched her go, feeling a sense of satisfaction. I had finally stood up to her, and I had won. But I knew that this wasn't the end of the story. Karen was not the type to give up easily. She would be back. And I had to be ready for her. I turned to Sarah, who had been watching the entire scene with a mixture of amusement and admiration. "Wow," she said. "You were amazing. You really put her in her place." I smiled. "Thanks," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." We went back inside and made ourselves another cup of coffee. We sat by the window, watching Karen's house, waiting for her next move. But nothing happened. Hours passed, and Karen didn't come out of her house. I started to wonder if she had given up. But then, around lunchtime, I saw a police car pull up in front of my house. My heart sank. I knew this was it. Karen had called the police. 2 police officers got out of the car and walked towards my front door. I took a deep breath and prepared myself for the worst. It looked like my cool party was about to get crashed. This was going to be interesting. Especially explaining 5 tons of ice. I suddenly wondered if there was a law against filling your pool with ice. Probably not. But with Karen, you never knew. She would probably try to find a loophole. She was that kind of person. She was determined to make my life miserable. But I was just as determined to not let her. This was my pool. And I was going to defend it. Even if it meant facing the police. The game was not over yet. Not by a long shot. And I was ready to play. I opened the door and greeted the officers with a polite smile. "Good morning, officers," I said. "How can I help you?" The first officer, a tall woman with a stern expression, stepped forward. "We received a complaint about a disturbance at this residence," she said. "Someone reported that you filled your pool with ice." I nodded. "That's correct," I said. "I did." The officer raised an eyebrow. "And can you explain why you did that?" she asked. "Certainly," I said. "My neighbor, Karen Miller, has been using my pool without my permission for several weeks. I've asked her to stop, but she refuses. I've reported her to the HOA, but they haven't done anything about it. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands." I gestured towards my backyard. As you can see, my pool is now unusable for swim lessons, I said. I hope that will deter her from trespassing on my property in the future. The officers exchanged glances. The second officer, a younger man with a friendly demeanor, spoke up. "Ma'am, we understand your frustration," he said. "But filling your pool with ice may not be the most appropriate way to resolve this dispute." "I understand that," I said. But I felt like I had no other choice. I tried everything else, and nothing worked. She wouldn't listen to me. She wouldn't listen to the HOA. She just kept using my pool as if it were her own. The first officer sighed. "We need to talk to your neighbor, Ms. Miller," she said. "Can you tell us where she lives?" I pointed to Karen's house, 3 doors down. "She lives right there," I said. "I'm sure she'll be happy to explain her side of the story." The officers thanked me and walked towards Karen's house. I watched them go, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. I was glad that the police were finally involved, but I was also worried about what Karen would say. Sarah came to stand beside me, putting her arm around my shoulder. "You did great," she said. "You handled that perfectly." "Thanks," I said. "I just hope this is the end of it." We waited anxiously for the officers to return. After about 15 minutes, they came back to my house. "We've spoken to Ms. Miller," the first officer said. "She denies using your pool without your permission." I scoffed. "That's a lie," I said. "She's been using my pool for weeks." The officer shrugged. "We have no evidence to support your claim," she said. "And Ms. Miller claims that you filled your pool with ice out of spite." I sighed. It was clear that Karen had lied to the police. And there was nothing I could do about it. It was her word against mine. "We can't take any further action at this time," the officer said. "But we advise you to avoid any further contact with Ms. Miller. If you have any further problems, please don't hesitate to call us." The officers. As the police car drove away, I noticed that several of my neighbors were standing in their yards, watching me with a mixture of curiosity and amusement. Word of the ice-filled pool had clearly spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. Some of my neighbors, the ones who had also had run-ins with Karen in the past, gave me a thumbs up and a knowing smile. They were clearly on my side. "Way to go, Lily," I heard one of them yell. "You showed her." Others looked at me with disapproval, shaking their heads and muttering under their breath. They probably thought I was crazy for filling my pool with ice. "That's a bit extreme, don't you think?" I heard one of them say. But the most interesting reaction came from Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who lived next door to Karen. She came over to my yard, leaning heavily on her walker. "Lily, dear," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say that I admire your courage." I was surprised. "Really?" I said. "You're not mad at me for filling my pool with ice?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head. "Not at all," she said. "That Karen has been a thorn in my side for years. She's always complaining about my garden gnomes and my bird feeders. She thinks she's the queen of this neighborhood." She leaned in closer and whispered in my ear. "I'm just glad someone finally stood up to her," she said. "She deserves everything she gets." I smiled. "Thanks, Mrs. Henderson," I said. "That means a lot to me." The neighborhood grapevine was buzzing. The ice pool incident, as it was quickly being dubbed, was the talk of the town. Some people thought I was a hero, others thought I was a villain, but everyone was talking about it. Even the local news station showed up, wanting to do a story on the HOA pool war. I politely declined, not wanting to attract any more attention to myself. The HOA also got wind of the situation. Brenda, the same woman I had spoken to on the phone, called me, sounding much more concerned than she had before. "Ms. Thompson," she said, "we've received several complaints about your pool. We need you to remove the ice immediately. Or what? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Are you going to fine me? Are you going to send me a notice of violation? Brenda stammered. Well, yes, she said. We have to follow the proper procedures. Fine, I said. I'll remove the ice. But I expect you to do something about Karen Miller. She's the one who started all of this. Brenda sighed. We'll look into it, Ms. Thompson, she said. But I can't promise anything. I hung up the phone, feeling more frustrated than ever. The HOA was still useless. They were more concerned with appearances than with actually solving the problem. But I knew that I had made my point. Karen had been humiliated. The neighborhood knew what she had done. And that was enough for me. It was time to start melting this ice, both literally and figuratively. But I suspected this was far from over. This kind of feud was not going to end with just a pool full of ice. There was going to be more. I could feel it in my bones. But for now, I was content with the chaos I had created. The ball was in Karen's court. And I was ready to see what she would do next. This was war. And I was prepared to fight to the end. Or at least, until the ice melted. Then, it was back to the drawing board. The next day, I received a formal letter from the HOA. It was a notice of violation addressed to Karen Miller. It stated that she had been accused of using a homeowner's private pool without permission, a violation of HOA Rule No. 42, subsection B. The letter went on to say that Karen had been fined $500 and was prohibited from using my pool in the future. If she violated this order, she would be subject to further fines and potential legal action. I couldn't believe it. The HOA had actually done something. It was too late to undo the ice, but at least they had finally taken action against Karen. I called Brenda at the HOA to thank her. I appreciate you finally doing something about Karen, I said. But why did it take so long? Brenda sighed. Well, Ms. Thompson, she said, we had to investigate the matter thoroughly. And we needed to gather evidence to support your claim. But I told you she was using my pool. I protested. Why didn't you believe me? Brenda hesitated. Well, she said, Ms. Miller is a member of the HOA board, and we didn't want to accuse her of anything without solid proof. I rolled my eyes. So, that was it. The HOA had been protecting Karen because she was one of their own. It was so unfair. Well, I hope this is the end of it, I said. I just want to be able to enjoy my pool in peace. We'll do our best to ensure that, Ms. Thompson, Brenda said. We apologize for any inconvenience this may have caused you. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief. The HOA had finally intervened, and Karen had been punished. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. I went outside to check on my pool. The ice was starting to melt, and the water level was rising. It would probably take a few days for all the ice to melt completely. As I stood there, gazing at my pool, I saw Karen emerge from her house. She walked over to my yard, her face set in a grim expression. Lily Thompson, she said, her voice low and menacing, you haven't heard the last of this. And with that, she turned and walked away. I shivered, feeling a sense of unease. I knew that Karen was planning something. And I had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. This battle was far from over. It was just entering a new, and potentially more dangerous, phase. The ice may be melting, but the feud was just heating up. What could she possibly do now? I had to be prepared for anything. I needed to be on my guard. Because I knew that Karen was not going to let this go. She was going to make my life miserable. But I was not going to let her win. I was going to fight back. I was going to protect my property and my rights. No matter what it took. This was my home. And I was going to defend it. Over the next few days, I kept a close watch on Karen's house. I didn't see her leave, and I didn't see any suspicious activity. But I knew she was still plotting something. I could feel it. The ice in my pool finally melted completely, and the water was crystal clear again. I cleaned the pool, checked the chemicals, and got it ready for swimming. It was a beautiful summer day, and I decided to take a dip. I put on my swimsuit, grabbed a towel, and headed outside. As I stood by the edge of the pool, I hesitated. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the neighborhood, looking for any sign of Karen. But I didn't see her. I took a deep breath and plunged into the cool water. It felt so refreshing after all the stress and drama of the past few weeks. I swam a few laps, enjoying the peace and quiet. But then, I heard a noise. It was a faint buzzing sound, coming from the sky. I looked up and saw a drone hovering over my backyard. My heart sank. I knew it was Karen. She was spying on me with a drone. I quickly got out of the pool, grabbed my towel, and ran inside. I slammed the door shut and peeked out the window. The drone was still hovering over my backyard, its camera pointed directly at my pool. I felt violated and angry. Karen was taking this feud to a whole new level. I grabbed my phone and called the police. "I need to report a drone flying over my property," I said, my voice shaking with anger. The dispatcher took down my information and said they would send an officer to investigate. I waited anxiously for the police to arrive. I kept peeking out the window, watching the drone. It was still hovering over my backyard, its camera pointed at my pool. Finally, I saw a police car pull up in front of my house. 2 officers got out of the car and walked towards my front door. I opened the door and greeted the officers with a sigh of relief. "Thank goodness you're here," I said. "My neighbor is spying on me with a drone." The officers followed me to the backyard, where the drone was still hovering overhead. They looked up at the drone, their expressions grim. "We'll take care of this, ma'am," one of the officers said. "We'll find out who's operating that drone and make them stop." The officers got back in their car and drove towards Karen's house. I watched them go, feeling a sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. But I had a feeling that Karen was not going to give up without a fight. This was war. And I was prepared to do whatever it took to defend my home and my rights. Even if it meant battling drones in the sky. It was a bizarre situation, to say the least. But I was determined to win. I had come too far to back down now. Karen was about to learn that messing with me was a very, very bad idea. She had chosen the wrong person to mess with. And I was going to make her regret it. The game was on. And I was ready to play. A few hours later, the police returned. They informed me that they had spoken to Karen and that she had admitted to operating the drone. They had warned her that it was illegal to fly a drone over private property without permission and that if she did it again, she would be subject to arrest. I thanked the officers for their help and watched them drive away. I went back outside and looked up at the sky. The drone was gone. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It seemed like the nightmare was finally over. Karen had been punished by the HOA, warned by the police, and publicly humiliated in the neighborhood. I hoped that she had finally learned her lesson and that she would leave me alone. I decided to go for another swim. I put on my swimsuit, grabbed a towel, and headed back to the pool. This time, I didn't hesitate. I plunged into the cool water and swam a few laps, enjoying the peace and quiet. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the pool was sparkling invitingly. It was a perfect summer day. As I floated on my back, gazing up at the clouds, I couldn't help but smile. I had finally won. I had stood up to Karen and defended my property and my rights. And I had done it with style. I stayed in the pool for hours, swimming and relaxing. I felt like I had finally reclaimed my backyard oasis. It was mine again, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. As the sun began to set, I got out of the pool, dried off, and went inside. I made myself a delicious dinner and sat down to watch a movie. I felt a sense of contentment and peace that I hadn't felt in weeks. The stress and drama of the past few weeks had finally faded away. I was finally able to relax and enjoy my life again. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, I couldn't help but wonder what Karen was planning next. I knew that she was still out there, plotting her revenge. And I had to be ready for her. This battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. I needed to be vigilant. I needed to be prepared. Because I knew that Karen was not going to let this go. She was going to come after me again. And when she did, I would be ready. I would be ready to defend my home and my rights. No matter what it took. This was my life. And I was going to live it on my own terms. Karen or no Karen. It was time for her to move on. It was time for her to find a new hobby. It was time for her to leave me alone. But I knew that was not going to happen. Not without a fight. And I was ready to fight. I was ready to defend my pool. I was ready to defend my home. I was ready to defend my life. Because that's what you do when someone tries to take away what's yours. You stand up and fight. And you don't back down until you win. And I was going to win. I had to. Because there was no other choice. This was my home. And I was going to protect it. No matter what. As the summer drew to a close, I had a lot of time to reflect on the ice pool incident. Was it worth it? Was filling my pool with 5 tons of ice really the best way to handle the situation? On the one hand, I felt a sense of satisfaction. I had stood up to Karen, and I had defended my property and my rights. I had also gotten the HOA to finally take action against her. On the other hand, I had created a lot of drama and chaos in the neighborhood. I had attracted unwanted attention to myself, and I had potentially damaged my relationship with my neighbors. I also had to admit that the ice plan was a bit extreme. It was a risky and expensive undertaking, and it could have backfired in a number of ways. But ultimately, I came to the conclusion that it was worth it. I had tried being reasonable, I had tried reporting Karen to the HOA, but nothing had worked. She had left me no choice but to take matters into my own hands. And the ice plan had worked. It had sent a clear message to Karen that she couldn't just walk all over me. It had also gotten the HOA to finally take her seriously. More importantly, it had given me a sense of empowerment. I had realized that I was capable of standing up for myself and defending what was mine. And that was a valuable lesson to learn. Of course, I wouldn't recommend filling your pool with ice as a first resort. There are definitely other, more peaceful ways to resolve conflicts with your neighbors. But in my case, it was the only thing that worked. And I'm not ashamed of what I did. I'm proud of myself for standing up to Karen and for reclaiming my backyard oasis. As for Karen, I haven't seen her since the drone incident. I don't know what she's been up to, and I don't really care. I just hope that she's learned her lesson and that she'll think twice before trespassing on someone else's property again. I still live in the same neighborhood, and I still have my pool. And I still enjoy swimming in it every summer. But now, when I'm floating on my back, gazing up at the clouds, I also remember the ice pool incident. And I smile, knowing that I'm capable of anything. Even battling HOA Karens and filling my pool with 5 tons of ice. It's a story I'll be telling for years to come. And it's a story that reminds me to never back down. To always stand up for what's right. And to always be prepared for anything. Because you never know when you're going to need a good ice plan. This was the end of this chapter, but not necessarily the end of the story. I knew that someday, somehow, Karen would resurface. And I would be ready. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? What did I learn from my experience with HOA Karen and the ice pool incident? First and foremost, I learned the importance of standing up for yourself. If you believe that someone is violating your rights or disrespecting your property, you have to be willing to take action to defend yourself. It's not always easy, and it may not always be pleasant, but it's essential. Second, I learned the importance of knowing your rights. Before you can stand up for yourself, you need to know what you're entitled to. Read your HOA rules, understand your property lines, and know your legal options. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to handle difficult situations. Third, I learned the importance of documentation. Keep records of everything. Every conversation, every email, every incident. This will be invaluable if you ever need to take legal action. Fourth, I learned the importance of having a support system. Surround yourself with friends and family who will listen to you, support you, and offer you advice. It's much easier to deal with difficult situations when you know you're not alone. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, I learned the importance of choosing your battles. Not every disagreement is worth fighting over. Sometimes it's better to let things go and move on. But when it comes to protecting your property and your rights, it's always worth fighting for. Dealing with difficult neighbors can be challenging. But it's important to remember that you have the right to live in peace and quiet. You don't have to tolerate harassment or disrespect. If you find yourself in a similar situation, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to take action. And don't be afraid to get a little creative. Just remember to stay within the bounds of the law. And if all else fails, you can always fill your pool with ice. Just kidding. Mostly. The most important thing is to protect yourself and your property. You deserve to live in peace. And you have the right to defend that peace. As for me, I'm still living in the same neighborhood, and I'm still enjoying my pool. And I'm still prepared for anything that Karen might throw my way. Because I know that I can handle it. I've learned my lesson. And I'm ready for whatever comes next. Bring it on, Karen. I'm ready for you. You may be an HOA Karen, but I am Lily. And I will not be defeated. This is my story. And I'm sticking to it. And I hope it inspires you to stand up for yourself, too. Because you deserve it. We all do. The end? Maybe not. But for now, I'm going for a swim. Anyone care to join? The water's fine. And ice-free. And that's all there is to say about that. Until next time, beware the HOA Karens. They are always watching. And they are always ready to pounce. But now, so am I. And that makes all the difference.